A few words about Subramaniam sir. Dr. Subramaniam is a professor of Sanskrit at the Center for Applied Linguistics and Translation Studies. He has a PhD in Sanskrit and also a diploma in German, and he specializes in Paninian grammar, philosophy of language, Indian grammatical tradition, language and literature in Sanskrit and Telugu, translation, Indian literary theories, etc. He has studied the Vedas, Vedangas, and Darshanas in a traditional manner. He has published various books and CDs, and prominent among them being the Mahavakya Vichara, Sanskrit PhD, this was his PhD thesis, published in 1986. Then Theory of Language, Oriental and Occidental, published in 2008. He has about 40 published papers and articles to his credit. Maybe have a big hand, Professor. I would now like to invite T.N. Sudarshan. He is the first presenter of the Philology session, and I would like to, please come. Sudarshan has been a great help in organizing this conference, and I would like to just introduce him for a moment. So Sudarshan Therani is a computer scientist, and you will see all his topics have science in them. So he's presenting 4 papers, by the way. He's a computer scientist, he's a programmer, he's a hands-on technologist, engineer, he's a startup founder, entrepreneur, and a technology consultant. Now, all these technical sides apart, let's come to this side. He's deeply interested in discovering the immense practicality of the Indian knowledge systems. His primary research interests lie in symbol systems for representation and intelligence spanning man-made material systems, AI, naturally occurring systems, biological, and the Indic symbol systems. He also studies Sampradaya studies, Vishishta Advaita in particular, and the practices of the Sampradaya. These are part of his, in fact, these are part of his upbringing and immensely influence every activity of his. He is also an active participant in the vibrant temple culture events at many Vishnu temples in Tamil Nadu. Sudarshan, let's start.
Om Namo Vache Yachoditaya Chanudita Tasyai Vache Namo Namo Vache Namo Vachaspataye Nama Rishibhyo Mantrakadbhyo Mantrapatibhyo Mama Mrishayo Mantrakuto Mantrapatayaf Paradu Mahamrishi in Mantrakuto Mantrapatin Paradam Vaishvadevim Vachamudjasakam Shushrushenyam Manushye Ebhyastamma Deva Avantu Shobhayai Petarum Madantu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namasabhayai. I am very much thankful to the organizers, both Indira Gandhi Center for Arts and Culture and as well as Infinity India, for giving me a chance to stand before you. Now, we are going to have 2 papers on philology, and the first paper will be discussing the science of meaning by Shri Sudarshan. And just to say 1 or 2 words, it is the meaning is discussed across the Indian systems of Indian philosophy and schools of Indian philosophy, rather subsystems. So Shabda, Artha and Jnana, 3 things will be there. What is the Shabda? Gauhu. What is the Artha? Gauhu. What is the Jnanam you are getting out of Go Shabda is also Gauhu. So Shabdartha Pratyayanam Itaretradhyasat Sankaraha Tat Pravibhaga Sanyamat Sarva Bhota Rota Jnanam. This is clearly stated by Patanjali in Yogadarshanam, while discussing how to understand the languages of birds and animals, how a yogi will be in a position to understand. So later that Shabda and Artha, whether they are separate or, then if you can take as 2 entities, I mean Shabda, because we have, wherever you have Rama, Shabda has got this meaning, like that we do. And elsewhere what happens, Omityekaksharam Brahma, Vriddhiradayich, etc. usages are there. That means Brahma is not separate from Omkara. That means Abheda. So this is called Abheda, Aropa. When you want to see, I mean, do not want to separate Shabda from Artha, then they are different. If you want to separate, rather, Shabda will be different from Artha, and Bheda and Abheda. Separation, non-separation, 2 things are there. We are going to discuss. I will be commenting, saying a few more words after the paper is completed. The paper presenter is given half an hour, 30 minutes that is, and please stick to the time, because later we may have questions or a couple of comments, and then the next paper will be there, who also will have 30 minutes for that. With these few words, I now request Shri Sudarshan ji to present his paper.
So, this focus of the topic of philology is primarily, the approach is what is the kind of meaning that Sheldon Pollock actually derives from Indian text, and what is the history of these methods, because primarily he bases all of his analysis on Western schools of study of text. So, what are the problems with such approaches, and what does it mean to understand meaning from an Indian sense, and why at all Pollock's approach to studying Sanskrit text is flawed? All of that sort of, I'll give an overview in the entire talk. So appropriately, I think we should call this whole analysis the science of meaning. So, I'll there are a lot of slides, I'll probably skip through many of them or speed through them. So, I'll probably take questions at the end of the talk. So, yeah, so science of meaning. So, let's start with, I think I've already seen but the context is, how is our scholarship? Okay. So, our scholarship is based on facts. So, their scholarship is based on conclusions. They create conclusions, then try to fit facts which they already assume to be true, which is the general approach in philology or in history, all of those. So, the approach in my paper is, I do a survey of philology as it has evolved and practiced in the West. Okay? And the notion of language and meaning of philology is discussed. So, this is the focus of the paper. So, what I say is, the understanding of the nature of meaning drives its methods and study. So, philology is a Western method based on the Western understanding of meaning. So, given that, how is it possible that Western scholars can study Sanskrit text using Western methods? That is a fundamental mismatch. And in case we have to study Sanskrit text using Indian method, how is it not traditionally done? And why the entire approach of Pollock to studying Sanskrit text, or for the matter any Western philology, is basically illegitimate. This is a point I am going to make in this talk. So, how is the paper structured? So, I say I explore the nature of Western philology. I say what are its roots, its evolution, its goals, its motives, and then what is Pollockian philology, its method, its goals, discussion of language, Western theory of language, Indian theory of language, then the computation of language. Last 50 years, this third notion of language is also very important, and then the discussion of meaning. What is Western notion of meaning, Indian notions of meaning? Okay, so start with Western philology. So, there is this recent 2015 book called Philology, which says this is the forgotten origin of all modern humanities and social sciences. The 2015 book got so many awards, Princeton Press. It sort of lays out the history from a Western perspective, exactly what this whole story of philology has been in the West, and how it is the underpinning of scholarship in the West. So, the many humanistic disciplines of today are only from 19th century, but all of them trace the origins to one big old thing called philology, which is the study of texts, languages, and phenomena of language itself. So, that is philology in the Western perspective. So, in the 19th century, it covered three distinct modes of research, right, which is Sanskrit, Arabic, theories of origin of nature of language, and the study of structures, comparative study of structures, and historic evolution of languages and of language families. This is the root of Western philology according to the West. Okay, all philologists believed history to be the key to unlocking the different mysteries they sought to solve. So, only by understanding the historical origin of texts, of languages, or of language itself could a scholar adequately explain the object of study. So, this is fundamental to their approach. Historicism is so fundamental to their approach its insistence on comparison and genealogy. So fundamental philology, the same thing you can see in all of Western humanities and social sciences. It's all about who did what when. Now, why that is a problem or not a problem, we'll come to that later. So I'm just laying down the fundamentals now. So until the natural sciences in the 19th century usurped its throne, philology supplied the most influential model of learning in the West. The immense resonance of philology as a paradigm of knowledge is much less well known today because science won and philology lost. So now what is Sheldon Pollock's role here as a humanities, social sciences person, as a non-scientist? So because philology's legacy survives in ways we build knowledge today, right from newspapers, media writing, writing textbooks, everything, the excavation of the philological past becomes an effort at once of historical reconstruction and present-day self-understanding. So in exactly this role, Pollock fits into the whole Western edifice of academia. How is he going to help interpret text for today? So evolution. So Greeks, they have some Western story, which I won't say anything about any comment on this, but this is what the history is there according to them. So Greeks got, by the ancestors of humanities scholarship, they began speculation of language, they invented rhetoric, they commenced scrutiny of texts, they did all of that, they made grammar, they gave birth to European tradition of philology. This is the first evolution according to the West. So all of this will be refuted in a later monograph end of this conference, where we take an Indian approach to seeing this. So Greeks got there, philology eventually gave us today's humanities. Then evolution 2. So Plato accepted knowledge as a grasp of universal timeless essence. Aristotle believed awareness of particulars. So there are two fundamental streams in the West. One is based on dialectic, that is, we assume what is true for a common mass and then we derive meaning from that. Next is we ignore the common understood meaning and say what I am saying is correct. That is called rhetoric. So Pollock's approach is rhetoric, derives from rhetoric and not from dialectic. So again, they have two schools there. So you have to figure out exactly, there is a difference in the West also. What is commonly accepted opinion, what is your own opinion. Both are considered scholarship. Why it is, we will not discuss that now. So through the centuries, dichotomy comes again and again. Right? Philosophy arrives at universally valid generalizations, where philology interprets individual cases. So herein lies the embryo of modern distinction between law-seeking natural sciences. They call it nomothetic, which is physics, chemistry. They try to find general laws. And interpretive discipline, literature, history. It is only true to that person who wrote the textbook or person who wrote history, that's all. None of it is a generally accepted scholarship. So this is fundamental difference. So moment we say history or any of those interpretive disciplines, all of them are hermeneutic. They are not nomothetic. So any history, whoever writes, is going to be only subjective. This is very fundamental. So now 21st century, from the Greeks, I'll just put all of that in one slide. So they had Hellenistic needs to create philology, and it served the Roman Empire to create their own history of the Roman Empire, then Christian textual needs for interpreting their Bible, then they used philology to translate Arabic and Persian into Greek. Then it was used by Reformation philologists, badly roasted because they did biblical philology. Whatever the powers wanted to know, they would interpret from the Bible. So it's called biblical philology. And then it began to serve Orientalism, right from the first Portuguese came to India in 1468. It starts to serve Orientalism by studying of the heathens, which is us. So the Christian study of India is all driven by this whole notion of philology. So then the German, Spanish put it to the job of fulfilling national identity. So Germans have their own German philology, Spanish have their own stuff for the Inquisition and all of that. And then finally, justifying modern nation states in Europe. Why do you need a nation state? Or is it justified again through textual analysis of their own independent local texts in German and Spanish and Dutch, all of that. So philology is fundamental to even create the nation of nation state. This is only scholarship they could use as basis in academia and create a theoretical construct which could then be given to the powers that be. So what is this roots of Indological scholarship? So from that, out of the marriage of European philology and Indian texts, so there were two new fields of knowledge. One is Indology, the other is comparative philology or comparative grammar. The first offered no new methods. Indology is no new methods. Same scholarship and techniques were applied to our texts. Whatever they were using to analyze their own German biblical text, same thing they applied to our texts. And what happened? Indology became the first field in which a self-perpetuating cohort of European scholars, not the odd missionary, merchant or chronologer, worked systematically to uncover the riches of a non-European civilization across a wide front. So this is James Turner's own, I am not saying this. This is exactly what Indology is. They are just using their own biblical philological techniques or political philological techniques and then using it to study our own text. That is exactly what Indology is. So let's see what do people say about philology, let's say in 2010 or this century. Let's starting with Nietzsche. He said it's an absurd, Nietzsche for example, he said it's an absurd combination of inconsequentiality and hubris. Those are no signs, it's just your own opinion of whatever text is. It's not me again, it's their own guy. Then Paul de Man, Edward Said. What they said? The origins of their own advanced practices were to be found in this most traditional and indeed regressive of all scholarly practices. This is philology. This is again not me, it's their own premier scholars. So philology became new or modern when it found a way to conjoin a limited empiricism to a speculative practice with no limits at all. You can see it in Pollock's work where he uses the Babri Masjid episode to say Pollock is to say Ramayana is political, for example. Ramayana uses genocidal text against Muslims historically. So a lot of these are exactly based on these methods, nothing else. He is just using a method to new events in theory. The origins of cultures and finally to the human origins and mysteries surrounding those origins. For all of them they are going to use philology. So now we come to Pollockian philology. So what are his motives? So traditional domination. So this one of his initial purpose on philology is part of this volume by Breckenridge, in which he says traditional domination. So they want to see political part in everything including language. Traditional domination as coded in Sanskrit is not past history, to be sure. Partly by reason of the stored energy of an insufficiently critiqued and thus untranscended past, it survives in various harsh forms. So he uses some lot of verbosity to say Sanskrit actually encodes your caste system and all oppression in India is inside Sanskrit. So all of this is saying in a very convoluted way. That is his understanding of philology. A salient point of this book offers us is that Western approach to Sanskrit is often weighed down by political philology. So this is the review to Rajiv Malhotra's book by an ISKCON Swami, Devamrita Swami. And then there's, again I am just picking the third quote from Malhotra's book again. So what they say, Sanskrit philology was inextricably linked to the practices of power. People are keen to ensure civilization of the language through patronage awarded to grammarians, lexicographers, metricians, other custodians of purity, and through endowments to schools for purposes of grammatical studies. So they are saying the commissioning of one of the most important grammars for a polity was to ensure proper functioning and even completeness. So right from Vyakarana, in a sense, all of this is a disciplines created to control polity. That is his motives behind his philology. So now what does he do? What is the specific method? So he's got something called as degrees of freedom. So he says it should be, I'll just fly through this. He says discipline of making sense of texts. And he says it has nothing to do with meaning or truth. That is his philology. I am going to say what I am going to say, that is true. He says this, confidently says this, and we have awarded him, rewarded him, all that is a different story. He says it's not a theory of language, it's linguistics, it's not a theory of meaning. But this is a history of textualized meaning. What is that? It is his own rhetoric. That is what he says is the truth. So most of his theses are truly derived from this fundamental axiom. So he has three domains of history, a lot more on this on the final, there's a monograph philology by one of our colleagues, Narendran. So it sort of rips apart this whole philological method using our Nyaya Shastras. I think that we should, so that will be much more deeper on the specifics of dismembering this method using our Sanskritic methods. So I am just giving an overview of what is going on here. Okay, so lots of stuff he does. So what is the influence of Pollockian philology? So he connects himself to somebody called Gian Battista Vico. So who's an Italian, they call him as an as a founder of the humanities. There is a split between Descartes and Vico. So Descartes' followers, Cartesian, they have created science. Vico's followers have created social sciences. That's the story in the West. So he says human truth is like a painting. It can persuade us to the most evident falsehoods that it is pure truth. Right? So that is the notion of meaning. So he says the truth is precisely what is made. So they got no sense of what is the actual facts, actual reality. So he said truth is whatever you want it to be is the truth. So that is the basis from which he operates. So there are enough critiques. So Nietzsche then says, error is a precondition of thought. So why do we need lies? In order to live. So this is true for all humanities, all social sciences. I am not saying this. This is Nietzsche. Why do they fake it? Because they need to do a livelihood, nothing else. So you might ask, why is he doing it? He is doing it because he has a career to do, that's it, nothing else. So now I turn to language, Indian notion of language, so Western theories. So Western theory based on discussion of origin, like we said, it's all about origin. So if you want to know what is language, you have to go for fossil record, evidence. This whole fascination with Harappan script is all because of this, because it's a Western notion of language. Right? How does language get acquired? What is the comparison between human language and system of communicating? All this among animals, all of this is their fascination. And then comparative linguistics. So concept of families, they have some theory behind all of this. And all of this thing which is inside philology has now come into their understanding of language itself. So the bottom line is loose speculation about Adam's language becomes rigorous science. So that's sort of the principal footnote of all of Western theories. This is not my quote, this is again a quote from James Turner. So loose speculation about Adam's language became rigorous science for some reason. So Western theories. So as of 2017, 8 weeks ago, Chomsky's modern linguistics is criticized based on recent evidence. They still do not know what is language. 2016, they do not know what is language. Recently, cognitive scientists and scientists have abandoned Chomsky's own universal grammar theory because of new research examining many different languages, and the way that young children learn to understand and speak tongues is different. So all of Chomsky's assertions are actually wrong. As with all linguistic theory, Chomsky's grammar tries to perform a balancing act. The theory has to be simple enough to be worth having. It must predict enough things that are not in the theory, but neither can the theory be so simple it cannot explain even basic things. That is what Chomsky's theory is. It cannot even explain the basic things. So universal grammar appears to have reached a final impasse. In its place, this is their approach to negating Panini, which is the difference. Their research of usage-based linguistics can provide a path, according to them, for understanding the historical development of world's 6,000 languages. This is their Western. They have finally come to this. We do not know what is language. We will find out using archaeological evidence what is language. They do not know what language is. So now we come to Indian theories. So what do we say? Indian theories are intertwined with the cosmology and the worldview of the Vedas. We start from there. So we say role of language establishing and upholding dharma, which is Vedic, cosmologically harmonious, is the principal concern of language. Not none of those. Among the various systems of darshana, so Vyakarana, Mimamsa, Nyaya, so these things are called Padavakya Pramana Jnana. So Padavakya Pramana Jnana. So Padashastra is Vyakarana, Vakya Shastra is Mimamsa, Pramana Shastra is Nyaya. So this is from our Char's book. So this is from Korada's book of 2008. Right? Any scholar of language is said to have imbibed all these three Shastras, Padavakya Pramana Jnana. So now I'll just say give a brief on what Vyakarana is, again deriving from his book. Right? So Shabda, what is Shabda? Right? So what is Artha? Artha again derives from Shabda. So what do you do from root and suffix? So word has got two pieces, then a sentence has got two pieces. What are the meaning of the two pieces of a word? What are the meanings inside meaning? And what's the relationship between a word and a meaning? All these things are explicated in Vyakarana itself. And the reason of cause and effect, which is again none of these principal constructs are even there in Western theories of language. So Karya Karana Bhava. So next we come to comparisons. So each and every unit of Indian linguistic science is defined clearly unambiguously. No definition or rule is revised. They are impeccable solutions to all problems at both syntactic and semantic levels. Then he says, On the other hand, scholars of modern linguistic science are still searching for definition of word. They still don't know. You have 2000 years of so-called renaissance of civilization, they still don't know what is the word. So let's forget about discourse, text, sentence, meaning of text and all, let's forget it. They still don't know what a word is. So then now so that was their understanding of language. So let's come to meaning now. So Western theories of meaning. So they have a semantic theory, specification of meanings of words, sentences, some simple system. Semantic theories. They have a foundational theory of meaning they call. They say what do a few group of people assume it is some meaning, let's say it is meaning. So there is no basis for it. And then they have their own logic, propositional logic and non-propositional logic. Some sort of axiomatic math on which they try to derive meaning from. As of 2017, on all these three methods, there is still no clarity on as to how meaning arises using any of the semantic models. So you can check this out, entry on Plato, Stanford EDU. They still do not, first of all, they do not know what language is. So let's not, and even assuming it is true, they have some semantic models. And all of those models do not tell you how meaning comes. Where does it come from? There is still nothing. So last 50 years, the dominant view of the foundation of meaning in analytic philosophy has been the mentalist view. That is, whatever you think in your head is meaning. That is the theory they have. That meaning expressions in public languages are to explain in terms of contents of mental states of users of the languages. Finished. Very simple, a kindergarten level explanation of what meaning is. This is where they are. This is their advanced research on languages and semantics and whatnot. This is as of 2016. Yeah. So Indian theories of meaning, I'll just zip through it. So Shabda Vakya. There's no scope, very little scope ambiguity between Shabda and Artha. The notions of sound as basis of meaning have different approaches, meaning of textual Sanskrit. This is again because we have an oral basis of meaning. Shiksha, Chandas, Nirukta, they are unique to Sanskrit, not there in any other system. And exemplify the influence of interpreting meaning in Vedic Sanskrit. There's much more to go, but I'll just give you a brief of all of this. And then, so for example, this is like an example from Koradaji's book. So there is a 675 verses to explain meaning of unknown words, right in the Rig Veda. So this itself shows you the attempts at defining meaning are so old. That is the ambiguity itself, how it is resolved using all those methods. This is just an example. This is from Kapil Kapoor's book on language. Then I finally come to why are we even so worried about Pollock? Because does he have adhikara? So we have this notion of adhikara. So adhikara is, there are 22 bodies of knowledge we should have. First of all, we should totally know and we should be saturated in all those concepts before you even think about interpreting any Sanskrit text. So it's not one, not two, it is 22 bodies of knowledge which you need to know before you even can say what does the text mean. Till that time, you just have to take the meaning of what has been passed on traditionally. So this is the depth of, rather the skill of an interpreter. This is the minimum level of adhikara required to even interpret any Sanskrit verse. So any learned man who takes upon himself of interpreting Shastra has to have mastered all this knowledge, 22 sciences and the commentary literature, if he is to make an enduring contribution to Indian tradition. So does Pollock have any of this? I don't know. So you guys have to tell me. So Western scholarship of Sanskrit, what does it have? Whatever be it, it's not anything close to expected levels of competence of a traditional adhikari. So I think that much is clear. Yeah, this is sort of summarize all of that. So given this, you have interpretation, you have meaning, you have language, nothing is there. Then you have your Padavakya Pramanaka. Which one should you use to interpret Sanskrit text? Should you follow Pollock or should you follow our traditional way of doing it? Right? This answer should be clear. So what am I saying? All this I have said. What does it mean? He does not know what is language. He does not know the meaning of Shabdartha. He does not know the Paddhati for interpreting anything in Sanskrit. So an empirical nature of asserting meaning in the West, forget our own sense. In Western sense also he does not know. The principle of truth maximization, that is the Western model, that also he does not know. Yeah, done. So what finally I am saying is, what you get is the nescience of meaning if you use philology. right? He has not understood much of language. So I'll sort of, that's the last slide, I think. Yeah, it's a very deeply flawed Western method built on yet more deeply flawed foundation of Western language and meaning. So that's sort of my summary of their story of philology. And probably have, so basically it's this unscientific baseless rhetoric. So what I'm going to say is, this is what Nietzsche wanted to happen in 1874. He says, it's arrogant, expectation, philistinism, superficiality, overrating of reading and writing, and alienation. All this happens because of philology. What is its job? This 1875, he wanted to disappear from all scholarship. Today is 2017, and we still are discussing Western philology. So that sort of ends my talk. So this is the final call. Check out the monograph Philology to be released during this conference. So it's more like a sonograph. You will know exactly what all is happening to Pollock in his scholarship career. So this is sort of my last. This is on the third day is happening. So check out the monograph on philology.
Just one correction, in your paper somewhere you have written that the Vedic Shabdas have got a different meaning from Laukika Shabdas. Please correct that. According to Mimamsa, Yaeva Laukika Shabdaha Taeva Vedikaha Taeva Tesham Arthaha. This is from Akrutyathikaranam of Puram Mimamsa. So just to correct that. And one bibliography, you forgot one Vakshapadiyam translation of Brahmakanda. That you just add. Just two things. As you have already seen, please, any questions, please? And you have seen, see, the situation is very bad. They don't know, they are not trained on these lines. They never sat before any guru. Gushabdastandhakarasyat rushabdastannivarakaha. One who takes away a person from ajnanandhakara to jnanam, he is called a guru. If you do not sit with a guru, then vidyanati prasidati. Bhartrihari says in Vakshapadiyam, if you do not approach any guru, that vidya, if you learn on your own self, kiyadva shikyam unnetum, how far can you go just to decide the facts? So that will not be very much, useful or helpful to the people. So Shabda, Artha, Jnana, these things are discussed in Mahabhashya and Mimamsa everywhere. There are 6 kinds of Shabdas, 18 kinds of meaning, etc., etc. There are so many things to be discussed. Since for want of time, I am not going deep into those aspects. If any questions, please, I shall, paper presenter will answer. Otherwise, I will answer on his behalf, because it is totally, the Pollock's unnecessary, arrogant kind of writing without learning anything. First, you have to learn. Still, I am learning at 62. Why do you feel shy? What is the problem? Any questions, please?
Indian scholars have been saying that the Western translations or Western interpretations are not accurate. This has been going on for at least 150 years, right? But nevertheless, there is no impact of that. That is what, I would like to understand why there has been no impact of the Indian reaction to this Western thought.
You see, these British people, what they did, when they entered, for example, take the Aryan invasion theory. The entry word Aryan in Oxford Dictionary is wrong, because in Sanskrit it is Arya, it is Aryavarta. In 6th Adhyaya, 1st Pada, 3rd Pada, 109 Sutra, Prashodaradini Yathopatishtam, Patanjali clearly explains who are Aryas, what kind of ascetic life they have been leading, etc., etc. In Purvamimamsa also it is there. In Manusmriti it is there. Arya Vartah Punyahu Mihimadhyam Vinjahimagayoh. I learned at the age of 5 from Amarakosha. What happened during those times, Sanskrit scholars were not fluent in English. So these entire curriculum was simply dumped by the books of the Westerners. What they did, they created such kind of dichotomy. You are Aryan, they are this thing. So in my book, Theories of Language, Oriental and Occidental, I have clearly mentioned and compared Mahabhashya of Patanjali and Mein Kampf of Hitler, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. There he used Aryan, the word. And also Swastika also, of course, he borrowed. That's a different question. So why it did not happen for 150 years? Now, with my book and after so many internet these things, the AIT or Aryan invasion theory is buried after 150 years. Why didn't it take place? Your question. Because our Sanskrit scholars were not good in English. They were not actually, learning English itself is adharma. That's what their notion was. But today simply we are here. Those people may come forward and face us. Either put up or shut up. I am sorry to use that language. Are you prepared to tackle this issue? To discuss with us? Come on, sit down. Where do you want? From Vedas? Adyate ticha bhutani tasmadan nandadichyata iti. Taitriyopanishad. Annam, the word has got both the meanings, which is eaten by people, consumers, and we eat away the consumers also after 40 years or so. That's why a person is going to die. So Annam itself has got two opposite meanings. Like that everywhere. Jyotishtomena Sargakamo Yajayata, take a sentence from Veda and discuss Shavara Bhashyam. Akshata Shabdanam Artham Bravatam Shakti Sahakarini. When you are saying that a person desirous of heaven should perform the sacrifice called Jyotishtoma. But when it is said, that does not mean that anybody can come and just simply perform the sacrifice. There is Shakti. Shakti should be there. What kind of Shakti? Manasaka Shakti. Sharirika Shakti. Mentally he should be sound. Physically he should be sound. And financially also he should be sound. Please add these meanings to Yajati, Yajayata, and then only you interpret it. There are so many, actually there are so many things which are to be added to whatever is said. Just one thing I will give you. Tatparya vritti is there. The speaker's intention has to be taken into consideration, but not the primary meaning. Just take this example. Visham bhungshva machasya gruhe bhuktaha. Consume poison, but never have food in his house. Okay? If you take the vachyartha, have poison. First of all, he consumed poison. Then the question of going or not going to somebody's house for food doesn't arise at all. That's what I mean. What do you mean by taking the... And also, in his presentation, I have gone through the paper twice. He said Valmiki's meaning is different in Ramayana. The person who is commenting on Ramayana, his meaning is different. Outside person's meaning is different. What do you mean by this? Siddhe shabdartha sambandhe lokataha artha prayukte shastrena dharmaniyamah kriyate. This is the first Vartikam on Panini in Mahabhashyam, quoted by Patanjali of Katsyayana. So Shabda, Artha and Jnana are the three things will be eternal. They are unchangeable. Okay, then you get the meaning from the usage of people or from Veda. Okay, then why are you telling this? We learn Veda and know the Shabdas. We speak the Sanskrit language and learn the language. Why are you saying this? Dharma niyamaha. If you employ sadhu Shabdas or Shabdas acceptable to Yakarana, you will get Dharma. Dharma to moksha, dharmartha kama shari, moksha, 4 purusharthas, pillars of Indian culture we have. Okay, if you employ apashabdas or Shabdas not acceptable to Yakarana, you will get adharma and finally you will reach Naraka. That is the essence. So 3 counts of defects are there in people. One is physical, the other is mental, the other is vak. So for mental, with these things, Yogana Shastram is authored by Patanjali, and for Charakasotram, to get rid of the problems of health, physical health, and the third one, Vagdosha, Mahabhashya. Thank you very much.